Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I am here with the boy band song book tag. This tag was created by Trisha from Tell Her a Story, and I will link her original video down below. I was not tagged by anybody. I just really wanted to do this tag because it looked really fun, so I'm tagging myself. Question number 1 is I Want It That Way from the Backstreet Boys. Name a book that ended differently than you wanted it to. So going back a few years here, I am going with Ink Death by Cornelia Funk. This is the third book in the Inkheart trilogy, and I still love the first book. I highly recommend that one, and I enjoyed a lot of things about the second book too, but this book, I pretty much remember it as being like the first time I was truly disappointed in the end of a series. Basically, none of the things I wanted to happen actually happened, and quite a few things that I dreaded happening also happened. And I don't just mean like, oh, I wish this bad thing hadn't happened to a character I love. I mean, there were side characters who were written off for no apparent reason in a way that completely didn't match up with how they were portrayed in the first couple of books. There were characters I didn't like who got way too much page time. One of my favorite characters ever got completely just written out of the story, and I also predicted quite a few of the disappointing things, so not only did it let me down, but I saw it coming the whole time. Question number 2 is Back Here by B.B. Mack. Name a book that calls to you to reread it even though you have others on your TBR to finish. You guys ready? That is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is an absolute beast of a novel. It's 1,000 pages in this edition, and I know I have way too many books on my TBR to reread 1,000 pages that I've already read, but I don't know, man. Every time I see it on my shelf, I'm like, you know what I'm really in the mood for? Rereading that 1,000-page book. Number 3 is I'll Make Love to You by Boyz II Men, your most recent read that you stayed up way too late making sweet reading love to. Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling that sticks kind of close to the original story, at least for the first half, but the author definitely puts her own spin on things. Bryony, the main character, is an avid gardener, and she's just got the most like spunky and practical and intelligent way of looking at the world, and I think the writing and the setting were also really well done. The fact that it's a fairy tale retelling, I feel like sometimes you go into those and you kind of know the major things that are going to happen. Not always, but I still felt the need to continue reading it and actually see the events occur before I could go to bed. And I remember hitting a certain point and just going like, I'm gonna be exhausted tomorrow because I need to finish this. Number 4 is Liquid Dreams by O-Town. Name a book that you had dreams or nightmares about. So one of the most distinctive memories I have of a bad dream from a book is from The Grim Grotto by Lemony Snicket. That is one of these series of unfortunate events books, and I don't remember how old I was when I first read it, but I remember it came out and I was reading it at night, and I've always had this like fear of drowning or like suffocation. I don't know, stuff like that really freaks me out in movies or books or whatever. Minor spoilers for that book in case you haven't read it. There's a point where Sunny, the youngest Baudelaire child, she ingests this mushroom spore that's really deadly if humans inhale it or consume it or whatever, because it gets into your throat and lungs and it germinates, like it starts growing, and within an hour, you're choking to death on this thing that is growing inside of your throat and lungs, and you can't breathe. So not only was the whole underwater setting like kind of making me nervous already, but like reading that part just completely freaked me out. I had nightmares about that happening to me, like swimming underwater and like choking to death on something that was like alive. Definitely the scariest part of that already disturbing series I can remember. Number 5 is The Hardest Thing. Name a book that was bumped down your favorites list by a new favorite. And that is Ondine by Jean Giraudoux. And this was actually bumped down my favorites list by Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmond Rostand. It's definitely at the point where before, if somebody had asked me what my favorite play was, like, you know, separate from Shakespeare, I would definitely have said Ondine. And now it's like, well, let me tell you about these two plays. I mean, they're both like classic love stories with beautiful language and characters, and quite a strong element of tragedy sprinkled throughout them, and I love them both too much to choose. That's kind of something I didn't think would happen, because my love for Ondine was pretty strong from the moment that I finished reading it. Look at this coordination, you guys. Totally planned that. Number 6 is Summer Girls by LFO. Name a book that made you say, wait, what? And that one for me is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. Now I know this book is intended for children, and I read it for the first time when I was not a child, but the first time I finished this book, I was like, what just happened? Like, what was the ending of that book? I feel like things were resolved, but I don't know any of them. This was the first Diana Wynne Jones book I had read, so I wasn't really familiar with the way she ended her books, you know, definitely going out with a bang, and all of these revelations and plot twists that somehow all make sense, but they definitely take you by surprise. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the ending scene involves a lot of making sense of past events and sort of like rethinking characters, and there's a lot going on. And actually, it was like the second or third time I read this book when I finally felt like, okay, I think I got it. I think I got all of the things that happened in the last few pages of this book. Number 7 is I Can Love You Like That by All For One. Name a book you enjoyed or hope to enjoy after having a bad experience with a similar type book. And that one was A Thousand Nights by E.K. Johnston. This is a retelling of the 1001 Nights story, and I had previously read The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh, which is very popular on BookTube and elsewhere, and I really didn't like that book. I think I gave it 2 stars, and I loved this book so much. I just feel like this was such a powerful story about women and the power of storytelling and just how we change events by the way we tell them, and just the power of a bond between sisters or between friends, and I really, really enjoyed this book. And I'm really glad that I didn't let my negative feelings for a similar synopsis affect me picking up this book. Number 8 is It Happens Every Time by Dream Street. Hold on, these guys are like 13! Name a book you read at an age that was probably not appropriate to do so. And that is a book with a really long title that was How Far Would You Have Gotten If I Hadn't Called You Back? I read this in like middle school or grade school. I was like 10 or 11, I think, when I read this book. And I did not know what I was getting into. Totally gonna spoil like everything that happens at the end of the book, so if you were wanting to read this, skip this part. It was one of those coming of age stories where the only thing that really means is like lots of drugs and alcohol, like there wasn't any actual growing up, and the kind of end chunk of the book has her having sex with this guy in this weird like mountain spring thing. It was a very strange scene. And then after that, it was like she had this other guy who was kind of her boyfriend, or who like she liked and who liked her. I don't remember the exact relationship status, but this guy who was not the one she had sex in a mountain spring with found out about that or something, and he shot himself to death in his car, like supposedly accidentally, but it was kind of implied it was a suicide. And I think it's definitely possible for those topics to be handled well. I have read books that discussed similar issues or events that I think did a really good job with it, but this book was just not an example of that. So not only was I reading about this really heavy subject material when I was like 10 years old, but it wasn't even handled well, so. Number 9 is One Thing by One Direction. Name one thing that a book can have and you'll automatically pick it up. Shakespeare retellings. I cannot resist them. I will pretty much pick up anything that is a retelling or reimagining of Shakespeare. And finally, number 10 is Pop by NSYNC. Name a book that others think of as fluffy junk, but you think is pretty great. My answer for this question is the Bloodline series by Richelle Mead. This is the 6th and final book, The Ruby Circle, which I have not actually read yet. I do think it comes up a lot as like, oh yeah, it's really fun. Like, it's an engaging storyline and some of the characters are fun and it's funny, but I have been so impressed with these books so far. I think the character development is really astonishing compared to what I had naively expected going into this series. But I have just loved the characters and the story and the really powerful things these books have to say about acceptance and love and your family not necessarily being the people who are related to you. And there's also a representation of an eating disorder in this book that the main character suffers from, and I think it was handled so thoughtfully and well. Okay everybody, so that was the boy band song book tag. I'm going to tag Rocky from Blonde with a Book and Michaela from My Bookself, and just everyone who feels like doing this tag. You don't have to be like a boy band expert. I'm definitely a more casual fan. Even when I was younger, I wasn't like totally invested in the boy band scene, but this was a lot of fun. And just some of these songs are so great, like, you know you've listened to them. There's no shame in liking them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!